We'll go ahead and get started. We'll call to order, please.
Corbin,
Present.
Ellie,
Present.
Casey. Let's see. Oh, Casey's in the attendees. I will promote him to panelist. David. Let's see, David. Chris. Let's see, Chris. You, Adrian. Here. Aaron.
Here.
You. Not absent. Swin. Here. Matt.
Present.
Abby is absent. Bill.
Here.
Allison. Don't see Allison, but I. Pending. And Jessica, I think, is running a little late.
Thank you so much. Okay, go ahead and move to public comment. And it looks like we have Annika. Go first. Come on up. Go have a seat. Have roughly 2 minutes for public comment. Please refrain from being out in your person. Go ahead and get started when you're ready.
How personal?
Email, phone
Oh, okay.
number,
All right. Cool.
address.
Okay, yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Mike Hernandez. I am a welder design. I just wanted to talk a little bit about who I am. I'm a welder, designer, fabricator, and machinist. I work for a company called TerraCycle in Foster Powell. I've been working for almost 12 years, and we manufacture recumbent bikes, bike parts, and adaptive bike parts. I'm also a member of the Portland Symphonic Choir. I'm a veteran of the Air Force for 8 years. I'm also a member of the Gila River Indian community in Arizona. I also share space with a company called Stoic Wheels in the Hawthorne area, where I'm in the early stages of starting a small business. I live in the Boise Elliott neighborhood near Irving Park. Monica and I walk our dog to Irving Park almost daily. I ride my bike through Laurelhurst and Mount Tabor on an almost daily basis as well. So I really love the parks. And I'm a lover of bike polo, and we play at Alberta Park pretty much every Sunday, most Fridays throughout the year. And I assist my partner Monica here with her duties as the treasurer for our 501c3 board as Portland Bike Polo. And we just wanted to come out and say that we're in the very early stages of like creating Stoke in the club to like start some really active fundraising to potentially like resurface our courts or have a new court built. And we want to build a relationship with you all and so that we can help build our community, because it is a really positive space for a lot of different people of different backgrounds. And we're just really excited to be here and like learn the process of like how to do that moving forward and working with you all to potentially do something together. And so I think that's most of what I've got. Yeah. So, yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, I'll be in touch with you offline after the meeting.
Okay.
We do have a partner fundraising process that we just launched this year.
Oh, great.
So we've pretty much chosen a project for this year, but we'll be doing another cycle early next 2026.
Okay.
So we'll let you know about that offline, and there's definitely an avenue for us to work together.
Great. Thanks, you.
Thank you so much for coming in. Monica, do you wanna
Sure. Share a few words. Yeah. Thank you for coming in. I'll just piggyback. We're just here to build relationships with you guys and also just give our appreciation for how much we love the parks. We're just gonna keep saying it.
We don't get tired of hearing.
Then we'll keep telling you. Yeah, so that is great to know. That was just kind of more of our questions of like, how do we help kind of get in contact with somebody to ask the questions to? So yeah, that's it. We'll be around. Thank you. Yeah, what you got?
How do you, or have you, and how do you usually to go market your organization to bipolar? How familiar are kids, young people who are familiar with this? What do you usually do to reach out to school or high school?
Totally, yeah. There was a period of time recently where I heard that the club didn't have any new players for 5 years. And I have a lot of stoke for the club and newbies and definitely want to pull in a younger crowd, marginalized crowd, WTF players. It's dominated by males at this point. I think it's like 1 to 6 trans or women in the groups. So, and then we need to do more with that, to be really honest. We're like talking with a couple club members about doing some market PSU. And I know in the past we have some club members like in other cities that have gone into schools to like teach them about that. We often will give bikes or like loan bikes out for long periods of time. So we definitely have some good avenues. Nearly everyone in the club has like some bike affiliated person in their life that, yeah, hopefully to like put people on bikes more. So, and then as far as like advertising, we're just trying, I'm gonna talk to the Bike Portland guy again, and we're on the Shift to Bikes calendar. Just gonna try to start getting out in the community in different centers to
Do you have
tell
a
people
couple
about it.
of demonstration games at Pioneer Square with more people?
We did, there was a recent activity at OMSI After Dark as well.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Yes, thank you so much.
Also, if you have a chance, if you can send us your calendar, so you'll know when things are happening. Come by and see.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We'll definitely do that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. One more club member.
Hi, sorry, I just grabbed the
You can have a seat right here. Okay, cool. You have about 2 minutes. If you wanna take a deep breath and say what you're needing to say.
Okay, cool. I'm really excited to be here. I'm glad that this space is accessible for us and something that exists. I recently moved to Portland last August, pretty much specifically to play bike polo. I had visited Portland many times before because of bike polo. And the club here is really significant in the grand scheme of the national sport and, in my opinion, the world sport too. We have some like ex-world champions in Portland, and this sport is something that really drew me to move my whole life here. And I really do love the people in the club and playing here in the city. I love the city of Portland, and I want to spend a lot of time playing bike polo in Portland, like for years to come. And I think it's really important that the infrastructure is there to support that for me and the next generation of polo players, and for, you know, people like myself. Like, I want to convince my friends to move to Portland too. My name is Kevin, by the way. I'm from Oakland, California, but now I live by Mount Tabor, right off of 58.
Welcome, thank you. Also
Thank you.
from Oakland,
Oh, no way.
2020 and moved over here.
Oh, cool.
So, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
You.
I believe that concludes public comments.
Sure.
Thank you so much for coming. We're gonna go ahead and move
I will
forward.
say there is someone in the attendee section.
Alright.
If they would like to give public comment, please raise your hand. I see Jillian. If you don't want to give public comment, that's fine, but if you do, please raise your hand. Jillian, I will allow you to speak and you have 2 minutes to give your comment, and we'll go from there. You should be able to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, my name is Jillian River. I am I don't know if folks have told you, but the Portland Bike Polo Club is a nonprofit. Ani is the treasurer. I'm the president. I just wanted to attend the meeting and just kind of see. I've never been to one of these meetings. I just kind of wanted to be a fly on the wall, but you put me on the spot, and so I just wanted to say that similar to Kev, I also moved to Portland in 2017 because of bike polo. I had a pretty strong community of friends here, and California was unfortunately no longer a sustainable place to live financially. The Portland Bike Polo group is a good group of friends as well as a good community, and we kind of do what we can to promote the sport, but also support each other. It's kind of like a social group around an activity. We've been using the space at Alberta, I believe, since like 2005 or something, 2008, for a very long time. People in the neighborhood love us. We love being there. We are a growing club and hoping to get facilities or some other options potentially with lights so that we can try and expand, host tournaments, bring in other people to experience Portland, spend their money in Portland, have fun in Portland. So that's basically it. Thank you for opening up the floor.
Thank you, Jillian.
Thank you for joining us. We have any other public comment?
I think that's it.
Right. Nicely done, bike polo folks. Now to get the word out. I'm gonna go ahead and move to general announcements. Are there any general announcements? I would put out a quick announcement. You may have seen the annual report that has been sent out. We are looking at moving forward with a phase 1 and introducing the board to the new council members. We're gonna reach out to you, provide you with some talking points, as well as if anybody wants to do a mock or anything like that, we'll be made available to that. So the preference would be to meet in person, if not a phone call, if not an email. And so look out for some emails coming out, and hopefully we can coordinate this and introduce the board to the new council. I just want to open it up if there's any questions, board members or comments.
Wait,
Oh,
Sorry, you said something about a mock?
yeah, if people want to
Oh.
like do a mock session, sometimes get a little nervous, meeting people or what have you. I welcome the opportunity to do it via Zoom or on the phone. I'll make myself available for that.
And is the Parks Board members going to be correlated with their specific counselor?
Yes,
That
with
district,
their,
okay.
within their district, and so you can make a decision, there's 3 per district. We are thin, and maybe if anybody wants to back me up on it, I think we're really thin on District 1.
that's correct.
So that's also kind of dovetails into when we're looking at selecting new board members coming up, if you can appeal to some folks in District 1. So if you know anybody in District 1 that you want to give a little shout out about our recruitment, that might be a good way of doing it. Any other questions? Any other announcements? Let's go ahead and move to approval of, I believe it's February meeting minutes.
Yes. Matt had sent over a correction to note that he was present for the meeting, which I didn't put his name in. If there's any other corrections, please let me know.
We have a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
I'll make that motion.
you have a second?
Second.
What? Swooped in, all right, and then any discussion, any adjustments or edits? Let's go ahead and move forward with the vote, vote to approve meeting minutes with the friendly amendments. Stated by Michelle. All those in favor, raise your hand. Michelle, let me know when everything has been counted.
Looks like everyone's voted. I will go ahead and also mark Sabrina as abstaining. She has returned.
I didn't see anything from
Welcome back, Sabrina. Anybody else that's abstaining?
I wasn't here, so I'm abstaining.
Yes. Thank you. Anybody voting against? Thank you so much. Go ahead and move forward with the director's report. Director Long, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Corbin. I put in the chat a SurveyMonkey link for a North Portland Aquatic Center survey that's live now. And so if folks are so inclined to take the survey and share it, that'd be great. Yes,
Can that be actually emailed to us?
yeah, we'll follow up with it.
Thank you.
Mhm. I got it within minutes before the meeting, so. A couple of items, a huge congratulations, Parks has been, is proceeding the Metro 2040 Planning and Development Grant for $750,000 to fund a national design competition that would develop a new vision for the Tom McCall Waterfront Park Bowl. Was recommended by the grants screening committee and endorsed by the Metro Chief Operating Officer on March 3rd. And so the proposal will be considered for funding by Metro Council on March 20th. So we're really excited. So fingers crossed that we get approved on March 20th. So it's a great win. And that grant was written by Marty and Brett. So and just as an aside, I think y'all know there's a Human Access Project and the Portland Waterfront Pavilion are our community partners. And we also received letters of support from the Portland Art Museum, Prosper Portland, and the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. More good news. I'm gonna be bookending here. Parks was selected to receive a nearly $200,000 grant from ODOT's Innovative Mobility Program to implement a Forest Park, Washington Park Community Connector Shuttle. And the grant was written by, and the project will be managed by Liv Brumfield, who is our Renew Forest Park Coordinator. So that's really exciting. That will be bringing folks from East Portland to Forest Park and Washington Park. You know, that is a difficult trek for folks who do not have vehicles. Not so great news. The City of Portland hearing officer approved the PG Harborton Reliability Project plan. I'm sure you all have read a lot of articles about it. I want to note that the public, including neighborhood associations and nonprofits, can actually appeal that decision, but the deadline is March 21st at 4:30. As I understand it, if there is an appeal, then a council hearing will be scheduled. So that's the general process moving forward. It is my understanding that the Forest Park Neighborhood Association is moving forward with organizing, or at least they've had a meeting and they're having a discussion about moving forward with an appeal. I have some feelers out to find out whether or not the Forest Park Conservancy will be either joining that or doing their own. I just want to acknowledge the board and staff who worked really hard to provide documentation and letters and support against the proposal. And just acknowledge that the city staff in general opposed the project. So it's like a lot of stuff happening in real time there. So if there's something timely that needs to get in front of y'all, I will probably just email it. There's only 10 days before the appeal date. next up, I was gonna talk about the budget. I don't know how much is gonna be covered in the working group, so as usual, I'm sorry in advance if I steal thunder from folks. During the week of February 24th, in advance of the city administrator's preliminary budget being released, many of the division managers had conversations with some staff who will be impacted by the preliminary budget reduction packages. As you know, those budget recommendations were released on February 28th. The Financial Sustainability Working Group met after, both before and after the release, at a second meeting. They reconvened to review the budget. I believe that it was sent a little bit late, but the Fezziwig notes were sent to the board, so there's a lot of information in the minutes of the packet. So I don't, like I said, I don't wanna get too deep into the weeds, but I think everyone knows that the city has a really big gap to close, and the preliminary budget that was released does not hit the mark, and so there's definitely going to be additional reductions that need to be taken. This, I guess you can call it a draft budget, is just a starting point. So we anticipate that the mayor and council and committee are gonna be working over the next few months, you know, to get to the eventual adopted budget. The city council has announced listening sessions in 4 council districts, where they will be getting input from community. And then city council also has work sessions scheduled to discuss the challenges and approaches to gap closing. So there's a lot on the council website. After I'm done talking, I'll put some links in the chat as well. So the mayor's proposed comes out on May 1st. And then between May 1st and June 11th, the council, well, by June 11th, sorry, the council will amend and adopt, hopefully, a balanced budget. Well, they have to. So internally, we're holding all employee gatherings this week, tomorrow and Thursday, where we'll be going over the preliminary budget with all staff and talking about the reduction packages and the impacts. Very challenging conversation to have for obvious reasons, the least of which most of the staff that we've had, you know, have gone through a lot over the last 6-7 years in terms of our fiscal health. So I'm glad that we're having an opportunity to be transparent with them. Sad that it's a conversation that we have to have at all. I think that's all I have for that. I will also add that I think last month I announced all of the new council committees, and they're scheduling like gangbusters. So this morning, 2 of our assets and development staff joined the Arts and Economy Committee to co-present on the Darcel 15 Plaza. It was very well received and they did a great job. On the 13th, we will be doing offering a sustainable future presentation at the Climate Resilience and Land Use Committee. Todd and Sarah have been leading us in developing that presentation, and it's gone through a lot of iterations. So we're hopeful that it will go off without a hitch. And then Councillor Novick has expressed a lot of interest in urban forestry, tree permits, and the dead, dying, dangerous designation. And so we're meeting with him separately. This is not a council committee meeting, but just wanted to let folks know that there's this new system, this new committee system is good because we're getting to go in and have a lot of conversations, but it is very laborious. And then also on the 24th, we've been invited by the Finance Committee to present on urban forestry tree code enforcement. we have to take a breath. And see if anyone has any questions.
Thanks for the update. On that disappointing Arborton decision, so if there's an appeal filed, the board's opportunity for input would be to provide testimony, I think. And if there isn't one, are there any other waivers that you're aware of that we could?
Not that I'm aware of. I've been sort of scrambling to get the skinny on what the process really is.
Mhm.
But my best understanding, and the thing that I'm most concerned about, I will say, is that if an appeal is submitted on the 21st, how quickly council will have a hearing. Because I know that PG was looking to start end of March if their plan was approved. And so with a new committee, with a new council, I don't know how quickly they're gonna be able to accommodate a hearing. That's my concern. But again, I really just, I don't know when there's an opportunity for board to advocate, but I'll look into it. And we'll follow up. Sure, of course.
I have Ally on the screen.
Ally, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think it would be good to get a meeting on the books for the ad hoc committee that worked on Harborton, even, I'm thinking we'll know more about what local groups are gonna be doing next week in terms of appeal, and we could be, potentially start talking to them to see if a letter is warranted or other ways that we could contribute. So I will, send an invite out to the folks who had served on the ad hoc committee so that we can get something on the books ASAP, if that works for folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ally.
Thank you, Ally. Any other questions, comments?
Couple things, so the cuts that we've now submitted, what do you anticipate, what percent are they at this point? I realize it's kind of a couple rounds at least probably, and what do you see as the impact on services? May not know yet, but.
Well, our cuts were the full percentage that we were asked to take. What the city administrator presented was about 30%, right? Ish.
I think Claudia, if you're on there, they're short about 40 million.
Oh.
Yeah, that's my understanding of
Yeah.
what the overall city situation is. And just as a reminder, the cuts that we submitted, a portion of them go towards meeting our general fund target of $6.8 million. That's the cut that was assigned to us as being our 8% off of our general fund discretionary allocation. And then the remainder of the reductions that we're looking at are to balance the parks levy. So so the conversation is a little bit confusing because what largely what the discussion is at the citywide level is the general fund gap that is remaining. And so how they resolve that is going to be a big question.
I think your question for like service level reductions, the materials that we shared at FYSIWIG break down the reductions in kind of program areas by division, so you can look at those. There's over 80 packages that it rolls up and all the details, so you don't probably want to read that, but you can, and each one has like an equity analysis for each one. But the slide deck that was distributed to the board is probably your best first resource. It's things like, I mean, the big things I think that will jump off the page, everyone's got their own value set of what they care about, but closure of a neighborhood community center, elimination of the Sun School program at 11 sites, a variety of different reductions for like care and maintenance of parks, whether it's assets and development or land stewardship, administrative cuts. So it's really the first round of the 23 million is really kind of across the board of all the divisions.
Okay. More cases. Casey, go ahead, please.
Thank you. And sorry, Todd, you or Claudia might have sent it out or Alex might have. I don't think I ever saw the slide deck come out. And if I have the ability to send out to all the board members, I'd really like to do that.
Yeah, we can send it out.
Yeah, if you could send it to all the board members, that would be great. I think it would be a real good
Yeah.
view. Thanks.
Thank you. Sue-Ann, go ahead.
Is that the slide that we saw at Fezziwig ad hoc, like a couple of slides, pretty short, is that right?
Every division showing the reductions.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think that was distributed.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
I can go on.
it's helpful. I don't know how wide that was distributed. Kind of sensitive to, probably not something that's going to be blanketly shared, or is it shared with the whole bureau already?
Mike Jordan's budget document was released to the whole city.
Mm.
All 80 packages in detail are there by position and materials and services costs by package. So it's all in there. We met with all of our staff the week before. That's what Director Long was saying. The affected potential staff. This is a draft, right? We met with all of them. We have an all-staff meeting tomorrow and the next day to go over it all with them. This is public information.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Go ahead. Go ahead.
One comment, just picking up with your passionate commentary earlier from the public. I know this is very early to talk about, but with the waterfront master plan, Waterfront Park master plan opportunity further down the line, I'm sure there will be several rounds of these public outreach sessions. We encourage you to engage with public comments and bring your passion to folks who never heard of it or not familiar with it, because all the visions is going to start with exactly what you're doing to make yourself known.
I have a question that is, I guess, adjacent to budget issues or the budget situation, as well as a federal sort of freeze on projects. You have a list of park adjacent projects that are being rolled back or held off on because of federal money not coming in at this time?
We have three, I believe it's three direct grants to the federal government, but I heard you say like adjacent, and I know the Office of Government Relations is pulling that together for the city, and then we can really go deep, right? Because we have like schools that are partners and like the free and reduced lunch program. I don't know what's gonna happen with that, so that's still being collected, but the initial direct ones, we can share the three grants we have, and as of now, they're not affected. But it's changing every day.
I heard about OMSI rolling back some of their projects. I wasn't sure if any of them were park adjacent or connected at all.
OMSI development projects, or is
Yeah,
it
I
OMSI
heard something
programming?
about I heard something about funding.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
A lot of
They're
funding is
holding
being frozen or rolled back or held on to. I was just wondering if that's gonna also affect Parks and Recreation.
The only project that I think, and we haven't heard that it's not moving forward because we may have missed the the mark, or whatever, is the Columbia Boulevard Bridge project, which hasn't moved forward in quite a while, but it's an ODOT project. Parks and Metro are included and involved. And I believe that that's federally funded for the most part, but we haven't heard one way or the other. We're not very, thankfully, reliant on federal funds.
Yeah, I just pulled it up quick. We have an energy efficiency community block grant. That's about $600,000. We have after-school meal program. That's through Oregon Department of Education and USDA. And then we have environmental education program. That's about 100,000. Those are the three direct.
There it is. I do have somebody.
Jen had her hand up.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Corbin. There is an Inflation Reduction Act federal grant of $12 million that a coalition of around 8 or 9 community organizations put together for urban forestry, community forestry, tree planting, education organizations being involved with that. It is led by Friends of Trees, and we are one of the organizations in there. We have not heard officially about that, but we suspect that will also not happen now. There's also a $2 million FEMA grant for tree planting as a climate resilience measure that we also anticipate we won't receive funding for now. Thanks.
Thank you. As we start hearing more about what might be frozen or what have you at the federal level, along with our local municipality funding situation, the more information you can give us each meeting, I think we'll appreciate.
Yeah, I'll ask Jen to send a summary so that we have all of this information in one place, and we'll make sure it is included in the minutes. And then we'll also then have it sort of as a running list to continue to track and monitor.
I appreciate that, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
So thank you for sending out the note to Partners of Parks about that Willamette Week article that came out on urban forestry, and I'm wondering if there's going to be any kind of response, with, I'm not saying there should be, but I'm wondering what the discussion has been. Very disappointing, as being a co-chair of urban forestry as well, and just seeing incredible job that they're doing based on real data. And to have, a few anecdotes frame an article like that is very disappointing. So, I'm just wondering.
We've had several in-depth conversations about
I'm sure
about whether or not to respond, and sort of our final decision was that we would correct any factual inaccuracies if we thought it was that important. But that the comments that we were seeing online were not as robust or as inflammatory as we thought they might be. Like, we were kind of seeing how things played out. And so to date, we've decided not to respond. We do have a statement, a holding statement, should we get prompted. And it's a take on what I sent you all, but with a little bit more language. So that's where we left it. We worked really closely with Jen and with our comms folks to, sometimes it's better to just let it lie than to poke the bear. But agree, it was not a fair representation of industry.
Go ahead. A lot of these usually are coming out from people experiencing hardship in the situation where they want to be heard, and also it tends to attract shared experience. So whatever we can do as urban forestry, not that we need to be defensive, but I think it would be nice to find a way that can be more sympathetic, as well as I'm on the side of the situation where projects being held up because a tree diameter was not calculated to the formula, and was a nonprofit to help mental health folks, and they couldn't get people in for another 180 days, which is really hard. And I think everybody has a different level of urgency and passion and focus. I'm not saying that we should focus on case by case, but I think sometimes the blanket regulation and formula may have the opportunity to readjust just to work together. And
I appreciate that. I would say there are very few cases that when they're brought to our attention that aren't dealt with empathy. And that includes, you know, getting translators, doing waivers, finding financial, like you have to be pretty intentional in your neglect or your abuse or derelict in responding to communications for enforcement to happen. And I would say that there are few enough cases that we do deal with them on a case by case all the time.
And maybe
And what you're gonna hear in the press are people who are not happy because the reporter was doing a certain type of piece. I know they asked a lot of other people what they thought, and their thoughts didn't make it into the piece because they didn't have negative things to say. So let's always take that with a grain of salt, but hearing you 100%. And you know, and we do, and you're not gonna hear about those good cases, right? Because they're not making the news, unfortunately, but we are doing a lot of really good work to ensure that community are not burdened by the code, by fees, et cetera.
And maybe even what you just said is able to say, we do approach it with a bit more flexibility. And I don't know, not responding, I don't know if it's sometimes it's probably good not to respond, but
And believe me, it's painful for me, personally.
Thank you, Director Long. Is there anything else that you want to add to the director's report?
No, but Sue-Ann, if that tree incident is recent,
180 days plus it's within the past few months.
okay, well, Jen Cairo has offered to look into that. If
We just follow, we did what we did.
did you have to do? Okay, well, just so you know, she texted me.
Thank
Let me
you.
rest, I'll look into it.
Appreciate it.
So, see, case by case basis. It's great.
Happy to talk, Jen.
Thank you, Jen.
I will note, Chris asked a question, I think this is when we were talking about federal funding, but Chris asked about whether there was a citywide impact on federal funding and what the impact would be on general fund allocations. She was concerned about the city having to move general fund allocations around to cover gaps, which could further impact the Bureau.
So less of a question that you might be able to answer now and more of just a general concern, because I know that the assessment for the Bureau right now currently is smaller as a percentage wise, but just thinking broader impact for the city as a whole and how it would impact the Bureau. And I know that there was some follow-up that needs to be done on that. So I just wanted to record that in the chat as a comment.
I
appreciate that, Chris.
I was gonna say, I included a link that the city of Portland has on federal impacts for the city, and it shows percentages and numbers for each bureau, if that helps.
Thank you, Michelle.
So I have two unrelated questions for you, Director Long. One is regarding the shelter. So situation, so it looks like between February 11th and February 15th, one of the recreation centers, Charles Jordan, was turned into a shelter for approximately 5 days, is that correct? And serviced 100 people approximately each day?
I think it was 4 days.
Over 4 days?
Yeah, 11th through the
15th?
14th, and then 4 days.
4 days. And it's about 100 people per day, is that correct?
Yeah.
And it was, 1,400 folks were displaced from programming during that time. And you said recreation programming.
Can you speak to what was disrupted? The
Maximo?
specific programs?
Maximo can.
Yes, thank you. I would love, because when you say recreational services, they're like, oh, people can't play basketball. And I would love to hear a little bit more context around what was prevented from moving forward during that time.
Yeah, so we could get, I could follow up with a much more detailed list, but it's everything from our team programming, or team sports programming that we have there, our school programming that we had, as well as the other.
Does that fall in an umbrella of childcare?
Well, the preschool is the childcare.
Okay. Any meals missing or?
Meals on Wheels.
So Meals on Wheels was not able to operate during that
I don't
time?
know. Maximo was Meals on Wheels. I think they shut down.
Yeah.
Would you be able to quantify missed meals during that time for those community members when the shelters in?
I can pull that together.
Yeah. Because I believe we're trying to try to reactivate the letter that we wrote regarding the shelter. So that's sort of more detailed information. So it doesn't get misconstrued that people are not playing basketball or they're not able to do basket weaving or what have you, that it's actually impacting people in some real material ways. Thank you.
Yeah, we can pull that together. And initially, when the weather event came up, it was initially stamped up, and then as they looked at forecast, and then more programming that came in. That forecasting.
I mean, it's always hard to balance the two vulnerable communities that are sharing that same space, but it looks like there's a better turnaround as far as cleaning up and implement that afterwards. Got better, so thank you for that. The other question, we talked about this offline, Director Long, but I wanted to bring it up during the board. I would like to see, and again, I don't know if it's something that the board is also interested in. I would love to see the city reaffirm the Paris agreements, despite the current administration not agreeing to it. The city itself can reaffirm it, and I just wanted to put it out there to the board and to Director Long, if that's something you're willing to write a letter about or something to think through. Funny enough, since the 90s, cities have been organizing outside of the federal government around environmental issues, and this wouldn't be the first time that the city has reaffirmed the Paris Agreement despite what is going on with the current federal administration. I want to put it out there to the board. If you heard anything, maybe from council or the mayor regarding the reaffirming of the Paris Agreement.
I have not, but we could reach out to the chief sustainability officer and find out whether or not that's something that she's thinking about. And I imagine, I would be surprised if she isn't. So I can look into that. If it is something that there's some interest, I can connect her with the board. She needs, community support.
All right, so I just wanted to open up the floor to the board, just thoughts around that. This has transpired in other cities, and I think, considering the funding issues and we're seeing services being rolled back, having the city reaffirm Paris Agreement for me is important. So I don't know if we can I would like to put a motion forward for the board to pursue that endeavor with city council and or the mayor through the support of Portland Parks and Recreation staff. Putting a motion forward, do we have second or first on it?
Sorry, Dr. Corbin, just for the minutes, do you mind repeating exactly what you are moving, putting a
I'm
motion
putting
for?
forward a proposal that we seek out the opportunity to speak to council or the mayor regarding reaffirming the Paris agreements and hopefully getting support from staff from Portland Parks and Recreation to do so. And if the board is interested in to do that, the Paris agreements. Go ahead.
I have a question. I would think that that should actually be more powerful if it comes from the city. Because then basically all bureaus are on the same page rather than just parks. Or we can all say, all the bureaus are interested in this, and then we say, city, please stand with this particular strong stand rather than just parks.
I was saying through the support of parks, that we can put a proposal in front of city council
For the city to say.
to reaffirm their alliance with the Paris agreements. So basically, I'm asking, is the board interested in pursuing that endeavor?
Let me bring that up because I never would have thought the city won't agree to that, but I guess we need basically
It's
black and white
if they
on
will,
paper.
maybe it's a reaffirming situation, not something that we can take lightly with everything that's going on. So if you think it's a worthy endeavor, I'm proposing that we move forward to see how we can do that, to coax the city into reaffirming it. Do we have a hand?
I'd happily support that and second.
Thank you. And we also have a hand.
Casey?
Yeah, I guess, I actually understand the argument, but I guess what I might suggest is that someone prepare a letter, showing how the Paris climate change makes parks better, or how they affect parks. And then use that as a leverage or an affirmation to council saying, we believe that following the Paris Climate Change Accords will allow parks in the long run to be better for all Portlanders, and therefore we would like to hear the city council to affirm them. But I think you have to make the argument to get there for us to raise the issue.
Yes, I think as the ecological system for the city of Portland that falls under Parks and Recreation, we can make that argument. So a letter, asking city council to reaffirm the Paris Agreement would be the act. Does that make sense?
Well, I guess again,
it would be asking them to put forward an ordinance to reaffirm the Paris Agreement.
Yeah, but again, what I would say is that I think you need to lay the groundwork as to why we're doing this. Why the Parks Board is doing this. And if that groundwork is laid, then I'm fully in favor of this. And I think you can't, I think it's easy to lay it, but I think it has to be laid out because when you first said it, I thought you're kind of getting beyond what our scope is. So I think it's important to make sure everybody knows that it's within our purview to go ahead and make this recommendation that the city go ahead and affirm the boards.
Thank you, Casey. Other thoughts?
Yeah,
Allison, go
just to say, I think that's a great point, and I think the connection would be fairly easy to make, like Dr. Corbin said. Putting in the time to think about what that language is and what stats and data we have to back it up.
Thank you.
Seems like it's all there.
Like we have a hand.
Yeah, just raising my hand to agree with Casey about making it so it's relevant to parks and the Parks Board to have it sort of branch out to the larger city.
Thank you. Sorry, for me, I thought that was an obvious connection, so thank you for clarifying. Sue-Ann, go ahead.
Because one of the things a little bit, knowing that we still can have much weight in the Arboretum decision from the city. And meanwhile, we're trying to look at a bigger endeavor.
The local global culture
Yeah.
connection.
I just felt like, I mean, it's a lot of effort to deliver a message that is very noble, but then meanwhile, at our door front, we couldn't make that much of a difference. It's very frustrating. So I don't want our effort to be just like token gesture, we try, but then how can we try that actually can take care of the doorstep issue and also in the global kind of lens. And letters can be written, but then I hate to have another letter and then they just kind of put it in the pile because it's not really, it's from Parks Board. I don't know how much that will make a difference to the delivery. I'm not against the idea. I'm just frustrated with the thing that we couldn't even make progress and happen. So what does that mean? What do we have to make certain things work? And even if the city say, yeah, we agree with you, Parks Board, but their action also did not align with what we hope it's going to take place for Harborton.
Well, I guess the hope is that through agreeing to align with the Paris Agreement, that we'll have a little bit more of a understanding and affirmation that parks and green spaces and the ecosystem within the city of Portland is actually recognized as important value, crucial infrastructure, all the things that were being said during COVID that for some reason has been lost since the point that we are looking at what $20-40 million lack of funding moving forward. So looks like there's a couple hands. I can table this to our next meeting, looking at the time, but go ahead. Who's the first?
I think Erin was first.
Erin, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, is the Paris Agreement something that any city bureau actually uses as guidance for decision making?
There has been cities that have used it, and there, and of course, there's also.
Yeah, I guess yeah, sorry, go ahead.
And sometimes it's symbolic.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I think that's for me, I'm like, I guess it could just be symbolic, but yeah, for me, I would, if they're gonna do that, like, well, then the city should be using what's in it as a guidance for decision making and future targets, objectives, etc. So I don't know, I guess I do not really like just maybe the symbolic. If it was just symbolic, I don't know how much I like that, frankly.
Something that they've already signed. The question is, will they reaffirm it during the current political situation? Is that Ally?
Yes.
And then Director Long?
I guess I'd love to know first, going with Erin's point, if the Paris Accords have directly influenced Parks' decision, the city's decision, or yeah, if it would be more sort of just in solidarity against what's happening at the federal level. And then just to Sue-Ann, I want to say, because I've been in a lot of city fights now, and I just want to say on Harborton, the first round is not the answer. It is very rarely the answer, and so it's a go to the mat thing, and you get punched and then you punch back. So I just want to say that.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. So in the city, there's multiple levels, and you have a lot of recourse, and there's a lot of folks, not just us, organizations working on this and looking into what to do next. So I just want to say we can take a hit and we can hit back.
Let's go.
Thank you, Ally. Director Long. And then Todd.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that we've got a, Portland has a sustainability and climate commission that is managed by the chief sustainability officer. And so I've already written her an email asking whether there's been a conversation at the city council or commission or her commission level about the Paris Agreement and reaffirming the city's commitment. I will say that part of her job is to develop and manage a climate action plan, which that is her like sole work plan thing. We work very closely with her, so you know there's a lot there, and I just wanted to let you know I've made the inquiry. It feels like if let's hear what she has to say back, because there might be an opportunity to partner if that's something that is of interest. But she reports directly to the city administrator, so I imagine that if this comes up, she'll be asked to opine on it. So, you know, getting her interest early is probably a good idea.
I appreciate that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just put in the chat the city's climate emergency work plan for 22 through 25. And I think one of the questions was like, have we been using this?
Yes.
And like in 2007, before there were Paris Accords, we started our own like carbon emissions audit for operations of parks. And we've been measuring that on an annual basis since 2007. And back then it was setting goals for 2030, of which generally we've been doing pretty well. The growth is the problem as we continue to grow a system. But energy efficiency wise, you know, low fuel vehicles or electric vehicles, like the trend is actually pretty good. But the growth as we build more things, it's challenging.
There's also green infrastructure that's baked into that as well, which is where the parks fall.
Yep.
So I think it's all connected, but again, I'm willing to table it for now, for deeper thought on it. There's something about not being alone in this and understanding that you have a global network to reach out to is also important. As a person that studies environmental issues, to not discount the Paris agreements and also being in solidarity with other US mayors, US Congress and mayors who work together to uphold these environmental policies. So if it's okay with everybody, I'm gonna table it for now. Hopefully people have more thought on it. I'll definitely bring it up next meeting. Allison, I saw that you had your.
Yeah, just wanted to again say that I think the timing for something like this is, I mean, it's just feels really ripe to at least explore it with kind of all the hits that Parks is taking right now with the budget, with Harborton, with what's happening federally. If we can do something, you know, to have that solidarity and to take some kind of action in this way just feels really good to me. And I think the connection, I'm seeing it too, it feels very clear with the Paris Agreement. So just throwing it out there, my second in supporting at least exploring this.
Thank you. Is there anything in the chat that? Well, thank you for giving me the time to broach the subject with you. We're gonna move to the working groups. We have the Board Affairs Working Group. Anything to report or comments to make?
Nothing than what's in the meeting minutes.
Land Use and Infrastructure Working Group. Anything to report or any comments that you would like to share with the board? Right, thank you. Financial Sustainability Working Group.
Madam Chair, I am gonna take more than 2 minutes. And
Go
if you need
for
to
it,
cut me
Jason.
off or Michelle needs to cut me off, feel free. But I think it's pretty important. What I would ask people do is to go ahead and look at the regular meeting minutes. But what I really request people do is to take a look at the special meeting minutes. What's being proposed, and this is a repeat, but it's really important. What's being proposed is a $23 million cut to the parks budget. That's a cut in programming, in people, and stuff that's on the ground and in the offices of parks. Now, there are two things that makes this $23 million possibly even worse. One is that this budget assumes that the levy is going to be renewed at the exact amount it presently is at. The other is, as Claudio and Todd mentioned earlier, there's a lot more that has to be done in order to break or to bridge the gap. That's the budget deficit. So it could get a lot worse. My request of everybody here, other than park staff, is to start monitoring at least the budget process. There's a couple of things that are coming up that I think it's really important for us to just listen to at least. There is a meeting of the Climate Resilience and Land Use Committee on Thursday from 10:30 to 12:30. The board hasn't been invited, but you can listen as public. And all the council people are now going to hold they're going to hold special meetings, community meetings about the budget in their respective districts. The first one I think is actually on the 18th. So it's coming up within a week. And I'm happy to send out, and I actually will send out, the timing and the places of all those meetings. There will be a time later, I think, I hope, when we as a board can go ahead and make comments about the budget. But for right now, I think it's important that we follow it closely, and we as individuals, not as board members, but as individuals, start questioning the council people as to, you're cutting parks, what do you want to cut? Because I think it's important that if we really do support parks on an individual basis, that we start making our voices heard, because there's more to come down the road. I'm off my soapbox. I appreciate your time. I hope it was less than 2 minutes.
A wonderful soapbox. Thank you, Casey. Moving to the community engagement working group. Anything to add, Susan?
I think we actually regarding the recruitment. We also need to talk about the recruitment.
Are we talking about the nominating?
That's the next
committee?
one, is the nominating committee. All right, nominating committee. I have nothing to report regarding the community engagement working group. Everything's in the notes.
I will just note that for the nominating committee, I've submitted the web recruitment to hopefully get the listing posted as soon as possible. The listing will then be will be open for a month. And once that's public, we'll send out an email to everyone so that you can all promote it and share it with your networks. And we'll also be asking our comms team to see if they could put like a press package or something together to help you further promote the board opportunities that we have available.
Thank you, Michelle. Any additions to the nominating committee? And just for correction, we're looking for older folks, people above the age of 50, people under the age of 30, folks in District 1, folks that want to serve, folks who love parks.
Folks
All
who
are
have
welcome
time.
to join us. Any other additions? Thank you. Do we have Portland Park and Recreation, Portland Parks Foundation here?
Jessica is here.
Jessica, you have the floor. Welcome.
Hello. Hello from Delta Park. Lots of activity out here. Yeah, I guess I want to build on what Casey was saying and really reiterate that there are additional cuts to be made to this current budget cycle. And I think it's really, really important that voices are loud and everywhere, that those cuts don't just come from parks. I think that there's some conversation about saying, well, what happens if we just take an additional $30 million cut to parks budget? You know, because if we don't, does that mean we're just leaving public, you know, because if we need to maintain public safety and we need to fund houseless, then let's look at parks. And I think they need to hear that that's not acceptable. So I really agree with that, what Casey is saying. The Portland Parks Foundation is presenting at this working group, the climate and land use. And you know, our main messages is exactly that parks, you know, that isn't, that's not the answer to this budget, the additional cut. And, you know, the other piece is just thinking about that we are, as we can see, we have a parks budget that continues to grow at a rate that we can't sustain. And so the council's at a time to think about what a parks system looks like strategically, and not just like piecemeal cuts together in that way, just to make a budget work. And so it's a conversation to have strategically with a lot of more than just like council, but with stakeholders as well. And then also to introduce the fact, like what Casey said, that this budget assumes a levy renewal at its current rate. And the impact of a levy renewal at its current rate, it means significant cuts next year. And so the Portland Parks Foundation is just introducing ourselves and the Intertwined Alliance as leaders in this conversation to get council to a referral in July and what that referral looks like and build a coalition of support around it. So that's that message on the 13th. And I think as we figure out what that next steps in the levy conversation looks like, looking at all of you Parks Board and how, if any of you want to get more involved in that conversation, we'll be reaching out. And then in kind of more fun stuff, the Portland Parks Foundation has a couple of awards and grant cycles open. Right now we have our spring small grants, which are $2,000 grants to community-based organizations. And they fund general operating and project support. This year, this cycle, we're only giving out 20,000. So you can do the math, $2,000 grants. In the past, we've received an additional 30,000 from the Community Partnership Program, which was levy funded to be able to do a pass-through to fund additional $2,000 grants. But that program is on pause due to the levy cycle. So we'll have 20,000 to give away this spring though still, and those applications are open and due April 15th. I can drop a link in the chat in a second. And then we also have our Emerging Leader Award, the Joey Pope Award for Parks Leadership, which nominations are open right now, and we extended the deadline to March 30th. I recommend taking a look at that too, and sharing with your networks and encouraging nominations. It's a great way to build recognition for the emerging leader or initiative that's happening. And then all of this is celebrated May 21st at the Laurelhurst Club, at our Friends and Allies Spring Summit, which all of you are invited to. We'd love to see you there. It is free. And we spend the evening celebrating volunteerism and leadership in parks. So it's a nice reprieve from a lot of some of the more difficult dialogue and a chance to celebrate partnership, volunteerism, leadership, and mingle and connect with each other. And those are our big things.
Thank you so much. Opening the floor to the board. Are there any questions or comments? Thank you so much, Jessica. Moving on to the Portland Urban Forest Plan. Great presentation.
Thank you, Corbin. I want to note that Todd just put in the chat that he's emailed everyone that slide deck that we talked about, and also there's some information about those upcoming council committee meetings. So we have Belinda Udelman and Brian Landau and Jen Cairo here to give an update and hope, and I believe some elicit some feedback on the urban forest plan. So Jen, do you want to kick us off?
Oh, wait, one more thing before we start. If we can make sure that we conclude the presentation before we ask questions.
Yes.
We may not end up finishing.
No interruptions.
The other thing is that if you can just provide a summary of what you're asking of the board, that would be very helpful to start off with as well. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Chair Corbin, and thank you, Director Long. Well, you were just speaking, board members, of Green Infrastructure and Climate Action. So this is a a nice follow-up to those comments. We are presenting today information about the Portland Urban Forest Plan, and in response to Chair Corbin's request, this is information for you all, and the draft of the Portland Urban Forest Plan is now out for comment, and we wanted to come to you directly to hear your comments. So we are looking for your feedback and advice. The Portland Urban Forest Plan is our long-term guide to preserving, planting, and caring for trees in the city. All the trees in the city are the urban forest. As PBOT, for example, has a pedestrian plan, we also in Portland have an urban forest plan. As I mentioned, right now, the draft plan has been written and is out for hopefully robust public comment. The city's most recent previous urban forest plan was created in 2007. And of course, a lot has changed in those almost 20 years. So our agenda for today is as follows. I think Belinda will take over next to present the draft plan overview. We'll go into the next steps in the process for the plan, and then there'll be ample time for your questions and comments. And with that, I will turn it over to Belinda Udelman. She and Brian Lando have led this project for over a year now. Thanks, Belinda.
Great. Thank you, Jen. So to start off, before I get into what's actually in the plan and some of the key pieces of it, I want to talk a little bit about the process for creating the plan. So we on the project team worked very hard to have a pretty comprehensive community and stakeholder engagement process, both to help us create the plan, but also just share information about the project to make sure community knows that it's happening and how they can get involved. So all elements of the plan, from our key messages to our vision, goals, recommendations, and actions have all been informed by community feedback. We hosted an open house, a survey, many community discussions, as well as focus groups specifically for centered communities. So with those, we focused on hearing from BIPOC communities, immigrants and non-native English speakers, people with disabilities, and older adults. And through all of those activities, we heard from Portlanders about their top priorities and concerns and their interests and values when it comes to trees and tree care and the way that we manage our urban forest in Portland. Creating the plan has also been a very iterative process with a lot of different feedback loops and different ways for people to provide input. So we use the community feedback that we heard throughout the project, along with multiple meetings with our advisory committees for each component of the plan. It was really important to us to make sure that we worked with our advisory committees to hear their guidance, then go have a staff work session, then we'd go back to the advisory committees to make sure that we accurately heard their feedback and guidance and were able to accurately reflect that in the plan. So guiding us through the process were our 3 project advisory committees. They are the Urban Forestry Commission, a technical advisory committee, which has included representation from multiple different work groups from 8 different bureaus. And that's included Portland Parks and Recreation, of course, the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, Portland Permitting and Development, all 3 public works bureaus, so Bureau of Transportation, Portland Water Bureau, and Bureau of Environmental Services, as well as Portland Fire and Rescue and the Bureau of Emergency Management. That technical advisory committee is also where we have formally engaged with our state and regional partners. So there's also representation from Multnomah County, Metro, TriMet, and then the Oregon Department of Transportation and Oregon Department of Forestry. And our 3rd committee is the Community Advisory Committee, which has been a wonderful group of people to work with. They're really just super great people and very dedicated. So they have been they include folks who have been engaged and have experience working with urban forestry and environmental advocacy. So there's representatives from groups like Friends of Trees, the Bird Alliance of Oregon, Johnson Creek Watershed Council, But there's also a lot of representation from people who have never engaged with Portland Parks and Recreation or never been part of a formal advisory committee. So we had a good mix of people with experience and people with just kind of average Portlander perspectives, perspectives of different centered communities and people living in different parts of the city. So that's generally engagement that we've gone through to create the plan itself. As mentioned, the plan is now out for public release, so we'll continue to hear public feedback, continue to give presentations about the plan to take it forward. So I'm going to go through the key sections of the plan. So what you're seeing is essentially an outline of the plan in case you haven't looked at it yet. The first 3 sections provide context. They tell us where we're at today. So we talk about what the plan is, why it's important. And we also use the beginning of the plan to highlight some of the key themes that we heard about from our advisory committees, including the benefits and importance of the trees in the urban forest, as well as the importance of the city and community working together to care for the urban forest. That was something we heard loud and clear from community and our advisory committee. And so we really wanted to make that message clear from the beginning of the plan. In the second section, we talk about how the plan was created in quite a bit more detail than what I shared on the previous slide, as well as some of the key themes that we heard from community members. And then the third section, Portland's Urban Forest Today, that's an existing conditions report. So there's some maps and tables. We'll talk about where our canopy is, who has access to trees and who doesn't, and why that's important. We also discuss some of the key players involved in urban forest management, the planning and policy context, and the challenges and opportunities that we and community face when caring for the urban forest. And then sections 4 through 6 really focus on what we want for the future. So we have our vision, goals, and tree canopy goals, and then recommendations and an implementation strategy to help us achieve the vision and those goals. We also heard a lot from our community advisory committee that tracking progress and accountability is very important. People want to know how we're spending their money and what we're doing. So that's its own complete section in the plan. So that it's very easy for community to see what we're doing there and what we're planning to do. So I'm going to go through some of those key highlights, but I do really encourage you to take a look at the plan online and share your feedback if you haven't read it yet. So our vision was created based on the feedback we received from the open house, the survey, focus groups, community discussions, and multiple meetings with our advisory committees. We ended up with quite a long vision statement. It's about 2 pages, so it's very specific with what we want. But these 4 statements in green are really the key values that are reflected in the vision. And then in the vision statement, you'll see that there's about a paragraph supporting each statement with more detail. So the 4 key themes and values are that the urban forest is healthy, biodiverse, and climate resilient. City decisions are guided by racial and social equity. The city and community work collaboratively to share responsibility and care for the urban forest. And that trees are integrated into urban design and planning to support healthy people and ecosystems. Supporting the vision statement are 7 goals. So these are comprehensive. They cover all aspects of work that we're doing and all aspects of urban forest management. So they provide a little bit more direction and action from our vision. So the themes for each of these are equitable preservation, care, and expansion, education, outreach, and partnership, and climate action and monitoring. These goals are a bit longer and more specific than the goals we had in our previous plan, and that's in direct response to what we heard from community, that they wanted us to be more specific, not just to use broad statements and buzzwords. They wanted us to be more clear. So the plan also has new tree canopy goals. For those who aren't familiar, a tree canopy goal is essentially a goal to show how much of a given area you want to be covered by trees from an aerial or above ground perspective. So with this plan, we have 3 new goals. So they'll replace the goals from our previous plan. They do align with other city planning efforts, like the Climate Action Plan and the Comprehensive Plan. They also reflect community feedback and best practices from other cities. More specifically, they respond to feedback we heard for making sure that people who live in all neighborhoods can enjoy the benefits of trees, that people have shade when they walk, bike, or ride transit, and that we are equitably expanding our canopy. So I'll go through each of these goals. And as you'll see, they reflect a pretty substantial increase in canopy from where we are today. But they're still just in alignment with industry guidance and responding to community interest in taking a more proactive approach to reducing urban heat and helping to reduce climate change. So the first goal is that every neighborhood will have at least 25% tree canopy cover. We've heard a lot of community interest over the years and as part of this process for having a kind of basic level of canopy cover across our neighborhoods. This aligns with our current planting strategy as well as the goals that were in the Climate Action Plan. So today, about 43 out of 94 neighborhoods meet this minimum, so it's about half. And we estimate that we need the equivalent of about 160,000 trees to reach this goal. The second goal is to increase tree canopy cover over our streets to at least 35% in 20 years. So again, we heard a lot about a desire for shade over streets, especially in some of the hotter parts of the city. So this goal does speak to shading our streets, but it's not only about street trees. There's many different ways that we can accomplish this goal. Street trees, yard trees, more innovative strategies to create space for trees in the right-of-way, median trees. This goal also reflects what we've been seeing in terms of recent canopy trends. So we have completed recent analysis of canopy cover over our right-of-way from an aerial perspective, but also our street tree inventory. And both of those show that we're already seeing an increase in canopy over our streets. So we want to keep that momentum going. So we'll move up from 24% where we are today, hopefully to reach at least 35% with the equivalent of about 108,000 trees. Our third goal is our citywide goal. So we want to increase tree canopy cover citywide to 45% in 40 years. This is quite a bit higher than our current 32%. But again, this is what we heard from all of our advisory committees in the broader community, that they want Portland to be ambitious, to take stronger action to reduce urban heat, but also to be realistic. And so we put in a lot of work to see, is this something we think we can really achieve? And the answer is yes, we do. It's going to take hard work, but we can definitely do it. And we want it to be reasonable and realistic. And so we've given ourselves quite a few decades to get there. So today we are at 32%. And in order to get up to that 45%, we need about 660,000 trees, which is almost the equivalent of 1 tree for every Portlander. And then we also heard a lot from the public and our advisory committees about prioritizing equity. So we didn't just want a citywide goal. We wanted to make sure that we could keep equity in mind as we're working towards the citywide goal as well. So what we decided to do is to use these pattern areas to make sure we're keeping equity in mind. So using these pattern areas, which I'll explain in a moment, helps us focus our efforts on continuing to preserve and increase canopy where it's needed most, focus expansion in some of the hottest parts of the city where canopy is the lowest, and where there's the greatest potential for more canopy. So these pattern areas, which are what's shown in the map, are created by the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability as part of the comprehensive plan. They reflect the different characteristics of the built and natural environment in different parts of the city. So for example, there's the western pattern areas on the west side of the river. We have our central city, inner neighborhoods, which includes mostly inner east side, but also some on the west side. And then the eastern neighborhoods, East Portland, and the rivers, which is the areas along the rivers and some of our industrial areas. To set the goals for these areas, we reviewed existing, so current and potential canopy trends in these areas, variations in land ownership and land use and the different ecosystems that we're supporting there, as well as different mechanisms for increasing canopy. So with our approach of using the pattern areas, just to talk through a few of them. So the west side, I think as we all know, has the most canopy in the city at 66%. So with this approach, we're proposing to maintain that where it is, and then bring all of the other areas up to reduce the disparity between the western pattern area and the rest. So for example, East Portland, we want to bring up to 50% from its current 27%. So there's a lot of work to do to achieve those goals. So we have 7 recommendations that can help us do that. These recommendations touch on the key themes that we heard from community, and they also align with our plan goals. So preservation, the first one, that's absolutely critical to increasing our canopy and achieving our goals. Reduce the cost of tree care for Portlanders, number 2. We've heard loud and clear that cost is a major barrier to tree care and tree planting. So we want to work to reduce the cost to Portlanders on both public and private property. Number 3, designing and creating new space for trees and other vegetation. We've also heard from community and from our advisory committees about the need for different bureaus and work groups to work together, to think creatively, and to really make new space for trees where there isn't any currently. We've heard specifically that this is important to do on public property where we have the most control, and where we can maybe take advantage of some of our capital projects. Number 4, expand the urban forest through planting, stewardship, and collaboration. We certainly need to be planting more trees and working with community to do that if we want to achieve our goals. And a big part of that is number 5, providing inclusive communication, training, and education, so that residents who are interested can have the knowledge and tools they need to be active stewards. And then 6 and 7, we need to continue to collect and analyze data, monitor the trees we plant, and also update and improve our city codes and standards and guidelines to make sure that they're working with us to help support and achieve our goals. And so for each of those recommendations, there's an implementation strategy. So that means that each recommendation has a set of actions associated with it, and each action has a lead and support bureau or agency who's already agreed to work on that action. Each action also has a timeline to begin the task and a relative cost estimate. So it's a total of about 60 actions, which is quite a lot, but we've actually have already started on, I think, about half of these. So we are still in a good position to keep this momentum going. And last is tracking progress. So we are taking a 2-step approach to track progress and accountability as a way to balance budget and staff capacity limitations, but also being responsive to Portlanders who want frequent updates about our work. So every year we will track and report on 10 different performance measures. They correlate to our goals, and so each of the 7 goals in the plan has at least one performance measure. They include things like number of trees planted in different parts of the city, trees permitted for removal or planting, tree care activities, tree survival rates, and the work that we're doing to partner with or provide education to the community. And so that's what we'll do every year. And then every 3 years, we'll take a more comprehensive approach and report on the status of each action individually and provide a summary of challenges and opportunities that we've experienced when implementing those actions to help inform future work and future updates to the plan. Okay, so just briefly to cover our next steps. As mentioned, we're currently in our public comment period. It's a long one, so it goes until April 13th. So plenty of time to read the plan if you haven't yet and share comments. And would encourage you all to spread the word to your networks. We really want to hear what people think of the plan and hear their feedback. And after we receive our comments, we'll make revisions and then work towards council adoption this summer. And that's all I have for the presentation, so I'll take questions or comments.
Thank you so much. Floor is open to the board. Sue-Ann, go ahead.
Thank you for a very rich presentation. I have a couple of questions. One is I noticed that the river, the one with the pattern, the river area in current is 13% and the goal is 20. And you look at the map and it looks like there's quite a bit of area that's along the Columbia River area, if I did not read it incorrectly. And a couple of board meetings ago, there was a comment during our discussion saying, oh, we'll never have no Forest Park area. It's on the west side. And I was looking at your map and I thought, well, it will be great if the river area can actually be bumped up. So on the east side, north side of the city would actually have a lot more opportunity to have canopies for another very robust green area. And I know you mentioned something about the challenges, not necessarily you have a control of the land, the property. I wonder why only set it at 20%, kind of low, if there's an opportunity to maybe increase that.
Yeah, so just to repeat, to make sure I understand, it sounds like you're wanting to hear why for the rivers pattern area, we're setting it at 20% and not higher.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. And we've just based on looking at the land use, the land and ownership, there's a lot of industrial land in those areas, and that can be a very challenging area to increase tree canopy. And then there's also some of the habitat in that area actually isn't really managed to be or intended to be really dense forest. And so we wanted to be respectful of that. Like there's some wetlands there, especially on that northern part, as you mentioned.
Okay.
And Brian, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Appreciate.
Yeah, I think I would just echo that's something that we heard a lot throughout the project, is the desire to increase canopy in those areas. And going from 13% to 20% is a pretty significant increase. It's going to require increases in canopy across all land use types, property ownership types, private property, city-owned property. And so I think there are a few different ways to get there. I think there are regulatory changes, particularly in the heavy industrial areas, that need to be looked at. but also from a sort of programmatic perspective as well, bringing urban forestry to the city's planting programs, partnering with property owners to identify opportunities to plant on their site. But yeah, just to echo what Belinda said, it's a tricky area. We have Swan Island, heavy industrial uses, wetlands, the St. John's landfill, which can't be planted on. So you start to run into a lot of difficult areas to plant. It doesn't mean we can't get there, but I do think that going from 13 to 20% is actually a pretty significant increase, even though it's not quite as high as the other parts of the city too.
I guess just in the vision, if in the past we were able to move I-5 and be able to create waterfront park, it may need to just have a bigger vision to be able to bike along the Columbia River and really make a zone where people living on the north side, east side, were able to have a very spectacular area in an urban scale that is full of tree canopies.
Yeah.
So I have a question before we go to the folks on Zoom. So if you encounter multiple attempts to plant trees in an area, what's the plan B? Whether it's the super hot or what have you, how are you thinking about the strategies around failed plantings in particular areas?
I think I'll try to answer that, Dr. Corbin. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. With our planting programs, we monitor them all very carefully, whether it's contractor or staff work. And so we know when there are issues in an area, and we look at specifically why there are issues. In some cases, it might be soil. In some cases, the species that was selected. In some cases, nothing's 100%, even though our survival rate is quite high at 95%. Maybe that tree didn't get watered enough. So the answer to your question depends on those characterizations. And also, if we identify that a site can't work for a tree, that's usually before the planting happens, because we do careful analysis and locations, we call it, before we plant. I'll mention also that part of what Belinda spoke to and some things we're working on right now are improving sites. So creating space for trees that wasn't there before. And a good illustration of that is a partnership that we're working on with Bureau of Transportation and Bureau of Environmental Services called Trees in the Curb Zone. That actually the trees have just been planted this winter, and we're hoping that pilot becomes a standard design across the city.
If I can just ask a clarifying question. With the design that you're talking about, is that like inclusive of bioswales or median tree plantings and things of that nature where there's more land made available, so to speak, for the tree to be sustained?
Great question. Yes, all of those. Trees are often planted in bioswales or stormwater facilities, as our partners at BES call them. They have to be the trees that can do that work in that space. Median plantings are also common, and a good example, we are working with the Bureau of Transportation and others to redesign parts of 82nd Avenue, which is very wide, paved, hot area in a low canopy part of town, to have a treed median there as well. And the trees in the curb zone is really new for Portland. Those other two things have been happening, perhaps not as often as canopy would like. The trees in the curb zone is creating tree planting space kind of instead of where a car might park. So defining parking areas on roads where there's underused parking space already.
Thank you. And my last question is, in those situations where land is being created to, I guess, support trees, are there opportunities for these to also be spaces of recreation or congregation for maybe communities that have been underserved and don't have the same access to park space?
Brian, I see you're unmuted. Did you want to answer that or would you like me to?
Sorry. Yeah, I guess I wanted to, quick clarifying question. Do you mean in terms of like property acquisition where a site gets repurposed for tree planting or other sort of community uses?
No, that if there's a situation where there's a median that's planted, that you might put a bench down there or encourage
Oh, I see.
people to use it recreationally. Are those opportunities also being considered when you're thinking about tree planting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, yeah, I think that's a really interesting. I'm not sure if that's something that's come up as part of this urban forest planning process, but I think as part of the other planting program specific aspects, I think those conversations are happening.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
What time?
It's 6:45.
Yes. I have a watch. Thank you, folks. It takes a village. Joy went down to check to see if there was anybody. So I'm gonna move forward. It looks like Ally has a question. If we happen to have a public commenter come up, I'll pause and we'll make sure we'll go with them. So thank you, folks. Ally, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for that presentation. It was really exciting to see the percentage increases in the areas that aren't heavily treed. I wanted to ask how you all are, obviously around streets and medians, all of that is kind of easy, or not easy, easier, but how are you managing for also our sort of more threatened habitats like native grasslands, prairies, oak savanna, places that aren't supposed to be heavily treed but are really important to the ecosystem, and balancing the need for trees and the need for those ecosystems as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a topic that came up a lot as we were establishing these canopy coverage goals. One of the advisory committees we had was our technical advisory committee, which had representation from parks, natural area managers, BES natural area managers, and that was a real topic of conversation. That not every natural area has the highest and best function as serving as a forested area. We have oak savannas and wetlands and other areas like that. So I think this, in terms of setting the, this plan does not get into the specifics of how to best manage those natural areas. That's a little bit outside of the scope of this project. But in terms of how we set goals for growing canopy coverage, where we're going to do that, that was definitely something that we tried to consider, is that we are not just going to plant trees across all these different habitat zones. There are natural functions these areas provide that are separate from that.
Great, thank you. And will there be a more in-depth, as this goes on, right? This is the first for comment. Is there going to be a more in-depth sort of plan that shows the areas where trees will be planted more heavily? Is that something that will be available to the public later, or not so much?
So we do have a citywide tree planting strategy right now that was passed. I think that was adopted 6 or 7 years ago, and that continues to guide this work. I think as part of the evolution of these different planting programs, those locations are going to be identified. The plan also, something that came out of this planning process, was having more management plans specific to the different natural areas in the city. So that's a longer term action item as funding is available, resources are available. But those are some of the things that are going to come out of this too.
Thank you.
Who's next on the Aaron? Is it Aaron? Thank you.
Yeah, great.
And then
Thanks.
Matt.
I might thank you for the presentation. Jen, and you answered part of my question, and so I might ask you to just expand a little. I thought the images on goal 2 were really descriptive of what the issue that we're facing when you look at this one is for tree canopy to cover our streets, where you have one picture of maybe like Irvington or Eastmoreland or something, where you have wide strips for that were a part of the neighborhood design to incorporate trees in the neighborhood. And then you have another picture of a neighborhood farther east that has sidewalks. Many don't, many of those streets don't even have any sidewalks, has no street no place for street trees. And so in this situation, you're either gonna have to redesign the streets or hope that people are gonna be willing to put trees on their property. And there's, you know, that can come with, who knows what people are gonna want to do, whether they're free or not. And so, I guess I'm wondering, like, so my initial question was about partnerships, which you already addressed, but I'm wondering what the scope is, given if you just drive out east, so many streets look like this, you know, or worse, for these areas that have low tree canopy, where it would really require either a lot of buy-in from neighbors or like total redesign of the streets. What's the plan there?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I've been answering a lot of questions. I'll let.
Yeah, I mean, the plan is to use a combination of different strategies. So we currently have 2 different pilots going on right now that are working on that. So we have the trees in the curb zone pilot, which Jen already described. We're also working on a pilot to plant street trees on streets that are unimproved, that don't have a sidewalk. So we're working on that now. And then we're also looking at others. There's medians on some of those streets. And then just collaborating with the Bureau of Transportation to think about other opportunities and other strategies and designs we can be using. Currently, the trees in the curb zone pilot, the first phase was just looking at one design, but for our second phase, we're already thinking about what are some other ways we can work that in. And then in addition to the city just providing funding and capital for that pilot, we're also looking at what changes can we make to code to allow property owners to do it on themselves too, if they're interested.
Yeah, and I think I'll add to that. This is why the species that we plant is really important, because the right of way can be shaded both by street trees, but by also, if the tree is a large enough form, by trees on private property as well. And that's why our planting program, particularly on private property, prioritizes medium and large form trees that are going to survive with the changing climate that we have. Because every time we plant a small tree that may not really be making the best use of its site, we're losing the opportunity for the potential growth that may actually shade the street, even though it's a tree planted on private property. And so that's why just looking at number of trees planted is not a really great way of understanding the success of a planting program. It's looking at the species we're planting, how we're taking advantage of each of the sites there. So that's also part of the strategy, in addition to what Linda was saying too.
Thank you. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, just building on what Erin said, it's good to hear you, thank you for the presentation, hear you talking about kind of a whole suite of strategies, because it's some of those more capital intensive strategies in East Portland seem like they're gonna be a real challenge over the coming 5-10 years. So excited to hear that you're thinking broadly about that. The other question I had was just around partnerships and the role of partners, and I'm trying to understand, like, how much of the tree plant, you talked about private landowners, you talked about the city planting trees. What is the role of partners in helping get trees in the ground? These are great goals, and they're very ambitious goals. So can you say more about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know, I'll go first, and then if there's anything else to add to it. But that's been a really part of this planning project. I think we have both sort of our more formal type partnerships, the PSEF funded Equitable Tree Canopy Program, which is providing $40 million for urban forestry to plant 15,000 trees over the next 5 years. That planting is going to be primarily done by different partners. Some of those will be for-profit tree care providers, landscaping groups that will be getting in contact with us. Some will be groups like Friends of Trees, who's been a really important partner as that's been developed and the design of that has taken shape. We've had a lot of partners who have been part of this process, serving on our community advisory committee. And some of the conversations we've started to have with them as well is like, this is a plan for the city of Portland, not just the government, but for all of Portland. And so one of the things we've been talking about is having those ongoing conversations with some of these critical partners like Friends of Trees, like Bird Alliance of Oregon and others, to see how, make sure that like the plan reflects the alignment that we have around the priorities, but also what support do they need? What kind of relationship building do we need to have so that all of our efforts are kind of working towards those same goals? So there's sort of the more formal through programming and contracts and things like that. But I think it's also just this sort of relationship building that's happening too.
Thank you. We have about 5 minutes. Sue-Ann, go ahead.
There are community members who may not want to have a tree. And what do you do when you are working with small businesses, especially small businesses? They own their property. They, speaking from my previous experience with some community members, they don't want trees because maintenance and sometimes it's just cost. Also blocking their signage. I don't need trees, and we just put an awning. And then for residential property owners, a lot of times they also just don't want to have trees in the front of the house for a variety of reasons. And financially, economical hardship could be also a very real, just because pruning trees maintenance is also expensive. So in that situation, a lot of times they are in an area with very low canopies. What are some of your strategies that are already taking that aspect into consideration?
Yeah, I love that. That's such an important point, and it's something we heard a lot throughout this project as we were doing community engagement. And I know some that our staff here as well. I know for our free street tree program, that is an opt-out program, and so we identify places where street trees can be planted, and then the property owners have the opportunity to opt out. And the number one reason people opt out is exactly for that point, the cost of maintaining that tree. They are concerned about the obligation they're taking on over the long term. And so I think our plan really tries to speak to that concern and bring some solutions to it. Fortunately, some of those solutions were already in the works. PCEF has provided significant funding for us to develop a citywide street tree maintenance program. So that would place the responsibility for maintaining street trees with the city rather than the actual property owner. That's how most cities in the US do it. Portland and a lot of cities in the West are sort of outliers in that sense. So that's where I think we can really get to that concern of taking on that responsibility, both in terms of the cost and the actual work of that. And we're also bringing a private property tree maintenance program online as well. This would provide financial support to qualifying low-income property owners to maintain trees on their property. So trying to reduce that burden is definitely part of it. But I think a lot of it also does go down to having working individually with property owners. That's something I think as our tree planting programs continue to grow and evolve, we're looking at the kind of most opportune places to plant right now, but we are going to run out of those. And after that, it's going to be kind of creating new spaces. And I think that's when maybe those kind of more individual conversations, working with property owners. How can trees actually meet the goals that you have for your site, whether it's managing stormwater on site or shading different areas? So then it's more of a partnership kind of thing.
Thank you. We are at time. Thank you so much for that presentation. And if the board wants to continue to participate, do you have a upcoming event that we should be aware of?
We actually had our last public event 2 weeks ago, our open house. So at this point, we're just looking for comments on the draft plan. So I'd encourage you to take a look at the plan on the project website, which I can drop into the chat, and then submit comments that way, or you're welcome to email them to me as well. I can put my email in the chat too.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 7 o'clock. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.